Before the President's Day recess, I announced that I would introduce legislation if the tax extenders weren't included in the legislation that we passed at that time that would keep government open. Today, I'm following through on that promise with a bill that I'm introducing with Finance Committee Ranking Member Senator Wyden of Oregon. It's fitting that I'm taking this step in the same month as Groundhog Day, as the subject of my remarks is something that Congress has had to deal with too many times already. Next to me is this chart from the movie Groundhog Day, which is about a man named Phil who must relive the same day over and over again until he gets everything right. While we still need to break the cycle of repetitive short-term extensions, the right thing to do right now is to extend these already expired provisions for 2018 and 2019. As I've said before, the tax extenders are a collection of temporary tax incentives that have required extension on a very regular basis in order to keep them available to the taxpayers. Currently, there are 26 provisions. At one time, there were as many as 50 some. We've done away with some of them or made some of those laws permanent. But these 26 provisions expired at the end of 2017. They need to be extended, and 3 more that expired at the end of last year. Today, we're in the middle of the filing season for 2018 tax returns, and taxpayers affected by these expired provisions need a resolution so that they can file. I want to stress that I want to find a long-term resolution so that we don't have to have temporary tax policy. But it's critical we make it clear to the taxpayers that these provisions are available for the 2018 filing season. And extending them for this year will give us room to take a needed long-term view of this temporary tax policy. Many of the tax extenders are intended to be incentives. And to be successful then, these incentives need to be in effect before decisions can be made. That is why we should provide extensions for at least 2 years to maximize that incentive effect. But it's also important that we extend these provisions for 2018, even though the year has obviously already ended. We've developed a very bad policy and a very bad habit of extending these tax provisions year after year. And people and businesses have come to expect the extension will happen. As a result, decisions were made by various businesses in 2018 based upon the expectation of extension. And that's a reasonable expectation because we've done it over decades. In other words, people did what we wanted them to do in their business decisions when these provisions were created. We should not retroactively punish these business people for Congress's inaction. Today, a diverse group of organizations, including, among others, the National Biodiesel Board, the National Trucking Association, and the National Corn Growers Association, sent letters to congressional leaders requesting that the expired provisions be extended through 2019 as quickly as possible. I want to quote a few sentences from that letter. Providing taxpayers with a predictable planned outlook as it pertains to tax rules is conducive to increased private sector investment and economic activity. Accordingly, we respectfully ask that you act to retroactively extend these expired tax provisions through 2019 on the first appropriate legislative vehicle. End of quote. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that that complete letter be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Another very important point that I want to make has to do with the question of whether an extender package should be offset or not. And around here, the word offset means is if you're having tax provisions that might lose revenue, then do you have other revenue coming in to take its place? Now, the House has decided that that's what you should do. Pay as you go, or pay-go, as they might call it. It's a rule of the House. I have a long record of promoting budget responsibility, and I'm as concerned about the deficit and debt as much as anyone. However, we also have bipartisan precedent for treating the extension of temporary tax policy like these extenders, just like we treat the extension of annual spending policy. In neither case do we need offset for such extensions. In other words, if it's all right to spend more money or continue to spend the same amount of money after a program's expired, and you don't have to offset it, when you have tax law that's been on the books for a couple decades, and it is sunset, and why should you have to offset that? But there's a few people around here that think it's all right to spend money without offsets, but it's wrong to do tax policy unless you have offsets. Now, there are a few specific items in this legislation that I want to take time to mention. Significant work has already been done to provide long-term solutions on two extenders, the short line railroad tax credit and the biodiesel tax credit. The bill I'm introducing extends those credits at their current level for 2018 and 2019. But I want my colleagues to know that I still remain committed to enacting the compromises that several of our colleagues and I've worked with the stakeholders to achieve. The bill also includes an extension of a proposal adopted last Congress that would extend the 7.5% floor for itemized deductions for medical expenses. Without this provision, the floor on deductions will be 10% for 2019. This means that without this provision, individuals with chronic illnesses and high medical expenses would have to pay more for health care before that excess can be deducted in the expenses on their 2019 tax returns. This proposal is a very important priority for one of our best colleagues, Senator Collins, and she deserves a lot of credit for getting what has turned into a bipartisan proposal to help many Americans facing catastrophic medical expenses. Finally, the legislation includes provisions to assist Americans who have been affected by natural disasters in 2018. This package includes proposals that we have adopted in prior years to help Americans recover from natural disasters across our country. For example, the package would allow increased access to retirement funds and relax restrictions around charitable giving. I'm sure everyone here would like to help people affected by these natural disasters as soon as we're able to. I don't want my comments today to imply that each tax extender should be permanently extended. But the right thing to do right now is to provide extensions for at least 2018 and 2019. In the long term, Congress needs to decide whether these provisions should be allowed to expire, or should they be phased out, or should they be made permanent as current policy or modified in some way beyond expiring, phasing out, or made permanent. Those decisions need to be made after we resolve the short-term crisis caused by the current lapse. These provisions have support of members on both sides of the aisle. So people that think that things around here don't get done only with Republicans fighting Democrats or vice versa, these provisions have wide bipartisan support. And there's a solid foundation for a long-term package consisting of many of these provisions in one form or another. We need to get passed today so we can chart the course for a reliable future for the tax extenders and to give business some certainty. Just as this Phil wants to stop living the same day over and over again, I think all of us want to break the cycle of short-term extensions of, in many cases, very popular tax policy. The legislation I introduced today with Ranking Member Senator Wyden of Oregon is a critical first step towards helping taxpayers complete their 2018 returns and helping us begin work on a long-term solution to temporary tax policy. I have asked our majority leader to Rule 14 this bill onto the counter, and I urge the House to send us a tax bill to address the extenders without further delay. Just this morning, I had discussions with Iowa congressmen of both political parties about this issue to contact the leadership of the House, the leadership of the Ways and Means Committee, of the importance of moving legislation, since the Constitution doesn't allow the Senate to move tax legislation in the first place. I yield the floor.